Learn. It is day 5 of Halton Garden Week. Welcome, welcome. We've got some amazing guests here today. Anelia and hiding in the background, Beatrice from Oakvillegreen. And they're going to be talking about planting some native plants from seeds. But we'll still give it a couple minutes while people come from the waiting room into the meeting. Yes, beautiful, beautiful day today. Couldn't help but go outside. If you are on a MacBook, we suggest using Chrome. It seems to be the best browser to work with our system. If you have any issues, you can pop them into the chat box, and either myself or Helen will help you with those technical problems. You will notice that you are muted and your video is off for the presentation. There will be lots of opportunity to ask questions. So you can drop those down into the chat box as well at the bottom. And then Anelia will be able to answer them at the end of our presentation. All right, I think we're ready. So welcome, Anelia. Anelia is from Oakvillegreen, and she holds a master's degree in geography and landscape ecology from Sophia University and a master's in education from Fairfield University. She's an OCT and National Geographic certified educator. Pretty much, she's awesome. She's passionate about trees and pollinators, works hard in her community to really educate and increase people about biodiversity and to create habitats for these native species. I've personally known Anelia for, oh my gosh, I think about 10 years. She's fantastic, super passionate. She's discovered all these unique ways of connecting people with the natural world and bringing, this great understanding of how ecology balances, all the living species. She's worked and been involved with Oakvillegreen for about 5 years now, I think, but mostly working on the Pollinator garden projects. She also, wait for it, grows over 100 different plant species in her own backyard, calling it her happy place. And I would definitely agree that would be an amazing place to visit. She is a firm believer that no act of environmental stewardship is too small, and that by learning, you are doing, and that is a great place to start. So welcome, Anelia. We are super excited for you to be with us today and to talk about 5 pollinator plants you can grow from seed.
Thank you so much for this great introduction. And I'm very, very excited to be part of that amazing all-week event. As Ali mentioned, my name is Anelia Tichkova, and I'm the manager for community and school engagement with Oakvillegreen Conservation Association. So I'm very excited to be able to share our experiences with planting pollinator native species and to maintain the pollinator gardens that we have planted with Oakvillegreen in my backyard garden. So I'm going to share my screen. And there we go. So I would like to start with the land acknowledgement. So Halton, as we know it today, is rich in the history and modern traditions of many First Nations and the Métis. From the lands of the Anishinaabe to the Atawandran, the Haudenosaunee, and the Métis, these lands surrounding the Great Lakes are steeped in Indigenous history. As we gather today on these treaty lands, we are in solidarity with our Indigenous brothers and sisters to honor and respect the 4 directions: lands, waters, plants, animals, and ancestors that walked before us, and all of the wonderful elements of creation that exist. We acknowledge and thank the Mississauga of the Credit First Nation for being stewards of this traditional territory. So what is a pollinator plant? This is sort of an informal term, but basically these are plants which provide food and habitat for pollinator animal species. Pollination is one of the most fascinating processes in the natural world. So pollination is how flowering plants reproduce, and the process involves the transfer of pollen from the male parts to the female parts of the same or another plant. Plants and their pollinator forms form a mutualistic relationship in which each benefits from the other. So in the plant pollinator relationship, the pollinator benefits by feeding primarily nectar and pollen, and in return, the plant benefits as the pollinator moves from flower to flower, transferring pollen. This movement allows the plant to reproduce and to exchange genetic information. So most flowering plants require these relationships with pollinators to reproduce. So why native plants? A lot of the not native plants can be pollinator friendly, but why are we focusing on native plants? There are a number of reasons, and very simple. Native plants grow naturally in the area. They have evolved with years and sometimes centuries, so they are the ecological basis for living things. So without these native plants and the insects that co-evolved with them, local birds cannot survive, and therefore the whole ecosystem is out of balance. Native plants thrive better in local soil and climate conditions with less water and maintenance. And planting a pollinator garden not only beautifies your yard and provides food for existing pollinator, but it also fights climate change. So plants are like carbon sinks. They can soak up a lot of carbon dioxide, and a garden therefore can be one of nature's climate change fighting tools. It means less pesticide use, less watering, less noise, and exhaust gases from lawnmowers. So it's amazing just to see the changes when you keep replacing some of the pavement area or some of the lawn with pollinator habitats and observe throughout the years. Last but not least, native plants are absolutely beautiful. So what are the factors to consider before planting, before even we start the seeds and before we have these seedlings which we decide to use for our pollinator gardens? So for our pollinator projects, as well as for our tree planting initiatives, we always say matching the right plant with the right site is critical. It is really, really important. So we're trying to take that holistic approach just to plant health overall, and take into considerations both the site characteristics and the plant characteristics, just to ensure that we make that as much perfect as we can match. So when I talk about site characteristics, I mean climate, soil, planting space, other plants, trees already existing in the area, or buildings, maintenance to be provided, and mentioning, plant characteristics. These would include hardiness of the plant, growth habit, size, resistance to diseases, drought tolerance or salt tolerance, light requirements, and etc. So I already included here a few more things because these are a lot of fun to plan and consider when we are working on our pollinator projects. So choice of plants that flower in different seasons, always a very, very important factor. We always love to include early bloomers, which could be trees as well, and bushes, not only flowers, although the focus is on flowers today. also summer blooming and late bloomers that are very, very important for the late season food sources. Variety of plants. We often have community groups or schools approaching us asking to plant a milkweed garden. Milkweeds are amazing, but we do need a variety of plants. Biodiversity is really important when you design a pollinator garden. It would be great to include some night bloomers for these night moths so they don't try to compete during the day, which is not their natural habit. No toxins. Urban sites typically have altered soils and microclimates that cannot mimic the native conditions of any given species. So this is often a challenge for successful growing, but still we can do our best to ensure that we personally don't use anything that is toxic to the plants. So before I proceed and I share with you the 5 pollinator species that we chose today, just to mention, or rather to cite the definition of seed stratification by Kathy Cavasalis, a Halton master gardener, who's an expert, and we respect her advice very much. But stratification is a general term that refers to a range of processes used to simulate natural conditions, typically temperature and moisture that seeds require before germination can occur. So different seeds require different ways and time periods of stratification, generally between at least 4 weeks to 12 weeks. So what we're basically trying to do is just to mimic the natural conditions, just because native wildflowers that grow in local climates, they go out of dormancy when the environmental conditions favor their survival. So we kind of need to trick the seeds that they are going through the winter conditions, climate conditions, before they're actually ready to germinate, so they can survive. So here I come to the first choice. It is the swamp milkweed, one of the native milkweed species to our area. Personally, one of my favorites and one of my busiest plants in my backyard. It is a magnet for all kinds of pollinators, although it is actually a fashionable and favorite for being a host plant for the monarch butterfly. It does attract a lot of other pollinator species. It is a very important food source for many insects. It loves the full sun to partial shade. Can grow in a variety of soils. However, it prefers medium to wet soils. I do have 2 patches of swamp milkweed in my backyard. One of these sites actually meet the requirements for moisture. The other one does not. I have to say that both do grow very well. I'm trying to add a little bit more water to a little bit more of the watering, although that's not the point when we are trying to match the site with the plant. It does grow very high. It may reach up to 5 feet high if it again meets all the requirements for sun and moisture and soil. And it's best to plant it in clusters to provide a better habitat. A tip that I would like to share: swamp milkweeds are prone to aphid infestation. I found out that planting a few nasturtiums close by helped tremendously, just because they have the reputation as a powerful companion plant for many, including some vegetables, because they release this chemical that repels a variety of insects, not the beneficial insects, but insects like the aphids. So nasturtiums can also be a good companion plant for zucchini and squash. So I'm planning to try and to see how all these three would go together, maybe. Swamp milkweeds are wonderful, and I created a short video just to demonstrate the beauty and the attractiveness for so many different insects, really in a small habitat existing in my backyard. A lot of the pictures are either from my backyard or from the pollinator gardens we maintain as part of the Oakvillegreen project. So I'm going to play the video. All right, oops, sorry. All right, so I hope you enjoy that. I'm gonna start with step-by-step process and of the cold stratification method I choose for my swamp milkweed seeds. So this would be the outdoor method, which means that I prepare the seeds, ensure that they're not molded or empty. And one way of doing it is using plastic containers from any like juice or anything else. The only thing, they need to be somewhat transparent. So we drill holes on the bottom to ensure proper drainage, and we cut them in the middle. So we fill in with a potting mix. That is whatever potting mix you're using and you like for using for your seed starting. And then you moisten that soil so it's nice and moist. And then you plant the seeds and lightly cover with soil, very, very lightly, on the very bottom of the soil. I use duct tape to attach the two halves of the container. And then I write the date. I did this in January, and the species name. So once you're done with that, make sure that you leave the bottom part open, a little bit of an opening, to ensure we can allow air and some moisture still going in. And you place outside. So we wait for these seeds to break dormancy once the temperatures rise up in the spring. And these serve as like mini houses for the seeds. So they kind of create some better conditions for the seeds to germinate. And once the seeds actually they have one set or more of true leaves, and the danger of frost has passed, you can transfer. However, I would open the top part a little bit earlier than that, because normally we place more seeds than we need. So you need to thin out the seeds and allow just a number of the good seedlings to thrive before you transfer. The image here is we are actually planting swamp milkweed along with some other species, and this is one of our Oakvillegreen sites at Oak Park. And these swamp milkweeds were already in bloom last summer, and we look forward to see them once again in their second season this coming summer. So keep soil moist. My containers are all covered with snow right now. but once temperatures rise up later on, make sure that the soil does not dry out. Second plant that we chose is the purple coneflower. Coneflowers are one of the most popular cultivated plants in North America. They have very showy flowers. They're very, very attractive to pollinators. They normally grow in field meadows, dry woodlands, grassland areas. So they are drought resistant, but they do love their sun. So once again, I have them planted in a few different sites and with different exposures. Even the patch that I have at the front with relatively poor soil conditions, they're still doing amazing, but they do get sufficient sunlight, so they do love their sun. They thrive in loam soils, but as I mentioned, mine are doing pretty good in clay soils as well. Mature height is around 2 feet. This plant is, many people use it as like for medicinal purposes, and they use it for supplements to prevent common cold and boost the immune system. It is really very popular with a lot of, so I just placed a couple of images here with the like swallowtail and the bumblebees, but as I said, it is popular with most of the pollinators around. And it lasts for a long time, so it's a good, powerful bloomer. So again, outdoor method, just slightly different way. If you decide that you would like to try different types of seeds, so the container is not ideal because you normally place one type of plant species seeds in it. But if you would rather try a number of them, you can use your little containers. I recycle mine, I reuse them every year. Pretty much same thing. You fill in with moist potting mix and you label accordingly. I used popsicle sticks here to label, and then you can cover. I've seen people covering with duct tape completely. I just covered with some plastic and to secure with tape or twine. I added some more holes on the top of this plastic wrap just to ensure again that moisture and air still is accessible for the seeds. And if you can, place outside along a wall or in a more sheltered location. Conditions have been great for my seeds that were started about a month ago. So with all the snow, they're nicely covered. So another plant, the choice of plants actually is based on not only my personal experiences, but we've had a successful rate with starting these seeds from, these plants from seed. And these are also plant species that are somewhat easy to grow even in our urban environments. And sorry, I forgot to mention, but we will have a chance for discussion and for questions and answers towards the end of the presentation. So please make a note if you have any questions, and myself or Beatrice, who is here with Oakvillegreen, we will be happy to answer. So black-eyed Susan, easy growing, big bloomer. It is a beautiful plant, very drought tolerant. That image is from the Glen Abbey Pollinator Garden that Oakvillegreen is maintaining. It's once again best planted in bunches, and these seed heads are amazing even for birds during the winter. They love eating the seeds. Mature height is about 2 feet. It's not an aggressively growing plant, so it is a must in every pollinator garden. And it, once again, it not only blooms prolifically, but it also has a very long blooming period. Sometimes it lasts into the late September, which is amazing to see. Okay, so I'm offering, and it's not that for this specific plant, you must use just this type of cold stratification method. I've just decided to offer different ways of people. Let's say some people do not have an access to a backyard space or would like to try something different. I'm always experimenting, so I'm using both. I have seeds in the fridge, or depends if you have fridge space, but also to me, the outdoor method is always the best, just because it kind of mirrors the natural environmental conditions. However, I've had a success with refrigerator method. So here is how you can do that. You can actually do it in different ways, but just you prepare your seeds and potting mix. You can use sand, peat moss, paper towels alone, or a combination of these. So you mix the seeds with the moist potting mix, and you have the option of either placing this potting mix with the seeds directly into the Ziploc, labeling, or you can just use only paper towels. Alternatively, you can seed starting trays, so you can still have your Ziploc. I leave it open. The one thing you should always be aware of, that depending on your fridge and the moisture and the temperature, but this could be getting moldy if you don't monitor well, if it gets too moist. So you keep an eye and make sure that you don't suffocate the seeds. So you keep at least for about 30 days. Check on the seeds, as I said, for molt or for early sprouting. If seeds start to sprout, you need to remove from the fridge and plant in pots indoors until it is time to plant outside. Ensure you harden the seedlings before transferring outside. So this method, I find it takes a little bit more work if you decide to go with it. But again, it is a great way. We've used it even with tree seeds, just to prep the seeds and make them ready for the community to plant. So your choice, but as I said, it is another great way to cold stratify, to kind of trick these seeds that they're going through winter conditions. So here is my plant species number 4. It's the wild bergamot. It is a member of the mint family. So it does need space. It does spread a little bit. It grows quite large, but it does need space because it is prone to a mildew. So if it's really squeezed in and does not have the required space, it may get that mildew issue. So parche to full sun, easy to grow, a variety of soil conditions. However, does not like clay too much, and it can grow up to 4 feet. The entire plant above the roots is edible, and it repels mosquitoes, which is awesome. So the flowers have this tubular pipe shape, and they're perfect design for all the long-tongued bees, butterflies, moths, even hummingbirds. It smells really lovely, and it is said to enhance the growth of tomatoes and peppers. So if you would like to do a combination of edibles and native pollinator plants, you can plant somewhere close by to your tomatoes and peppers. So it attracts butterflies, bees, hummingbirds, as I said, and it is a wonderful, wonderful plant to have. So wild bergamot, although a lot of these native seeds, they need to be stratified before they germinate. The seeds of wild bergamot do not necessarily need stratification. They can instead be sown directly outside. However, oh, these are a couple of photos again from my garden. But once again, what I love doing with such seeds that are very easy to grow, they don't need these months of cold stratification, I still love planting them, sowing them outdoors, but not necessarily in April outside. I do it during the winter time. So it's suitable for direct sowing in the fall or early spring. So just because in the middle of winter, sometimes you're not able to dig. So I love, if that's not the location where you would like to grow your wild bergamot, or another common name is bee balm, you may want to use your containers and dig up some holes for these containers. So this way, you have the seedlings, because it's very, very tricky to transplant the very young and fragile seedlings. So this way you can start, you can just move the whole container without damaging the seedling, and then you can bring it, or you can just wait a little bit for the plant to grow bigger and stronger before transferring to the right location. Okay. So again, wild bergamot, just make sure that you plant in well-drained soils. It does not like a lot of moisture. And New England Aster, I had to put another plant that actually blooms late in the season. People often don't plant asters or goldenrods for various reasons, but asters sometimes tend to be a little bit of bullies in a way that they grow bigger, they take over space. So make sure if you plant New England Aster that you allow it a lot of space. It can grow up to 5 feet. But this is one of the amazing late bloomers that provides that critical food source for the pollinators, and they need it in order to survive the cold months. So a caterpillar and larva host to the pearl crescent and silvery checker spot butterflies. It can tolerate part shade, but again, it likes the sun and medium wet soils. Again, sandy loam and grows big. If you decide to go with asters that are a little bit smaller in size, I would recommend the woody aster or the hard-leaved aster. I believe it does grow a little bit smaller. So there are different types of native asters that they're still the late bloomers, but they do not grow as big. However, I love the New England Aster, and so do a lot of different pollinators. So you can use any of the methods that I mentioned above to stratify the seeds. You can just place in the fridge. I borrowed this photo from our former board member and Oakville climate activist, Aki Tanaka. She starts a lot of native plants from seed, and she has an amazing idea of covering all these pots and containers outside with these nets, just to prevent from rodents or from spilling, but still allows lots of moisture and lots of air to be accessible to the soil mix. So very different ways of how you can cold stratify. Again, with many of the annual plants, we don't necessarily need to stratify, but a lot of the native wildflowers, they have these hard shells, and they need a variety of these environmental conditions so they can break dormancy. And that's like an adaptation, a survival technique for these plants, so they can survive the different seasons. Again, don't forget to label, very, very important. Label your seeds, label your Ziplocs, your containers. Also put the date. It's amazing how you forget and or seeds get mixed up. So it's really important to label. Also, the date is important. So this way we know how long it takes, just because different types of plants require different periods of stratification. For some, a few weeks would be enough, where others, milkweeds do take a little bit longer. So if you would like to start, you can, but it has to be now, since it's still cold outside, so we can still do it, but they do need at least 30 days. So why native pollinator plants are vital for sustaining biodiversity? I would like to hear people share a little bit of their questions and comments and experiences. So I will be opening here to any questions or comments you may have. And I know that Beatrice from Oakvillegreen is here as well, just to take these questions. So feel free to enter your questions in the chat, or as I said, your experiences and why exactly native pollinators, why they're vital for sustaining biodiversity, because like in our opinion, it's not just to beautify, it is really to sustain local ecosystem and to connect these pollinator corridors in the urban environment. So every single step, even if you plant a couple of pollinator plants and then you keep increasing your habitat and your garden, and you keep spreading the word, it does make a difference. There is a huge movement right now. I love sometimes walking and checking on people's front yards just to see if actually, you know, what is there, and if there is a habitat in the city as well. So feel free. And
no,
yeah.
we do have a few questions. So
yeah,
there's
Beatrice,
one.
do you want to
Alyson
turn your
asked
camera
to give,
on?
Sorry, Alyson asked to give a little bit more specific information about like temperature. Are we talking about like when the temperature rises? Are you talking about like five days or more? Over what average of temperature? So can you give us a little bit more information about that?
I would say that it's really, again, depends on the species, but also depends sometimes on the seeds. Depends where they have been collected. We always say locally harvested seeds are the best if you can, just because it may be a huge difference. Let's say if you collected up north your swamp milkweed seeds and you're trying to cold stratify them here, they do carry their genetic information, and they would need a different period of stratification and different in conditions for germination. So really observe your seeds. There is not I wouldn't say there is a set time to say for certain species, okay, so you need, it is a very approximate timing, but you need to observe your seeds and for germination. So when the seed kind of gets a little bit bigger, swollen, when you see the little shoots coming out, it means that it is ready to plant.
Great. Thank you so much, Anelia. Beatrice, would you be able to turn your camera on? Because we do have a lot of questions, some fantastic conversations going on. There, now we can see Beatrice. Welcome, welcome. So yeah, great feedback, really helpful, practical. Wanda would like to know, are there any native pollinators suited predominantly for clay soil, which is definitely a very common soil type for us?
So that's a good question, because clay soil is very often the #1 reason for all these species that we try to put in our backyards to not survive. I could share my personal experience.
Yeah, please do, please do.
Yeah, Once again, although they say for the purple coneflower and the black-eyed Susan that it does have some requirements, I find that both of these species do grow well in a few different sites in my yard, and including clay soil. So I would say the black-eyed Susan is the least picky species that I've actually tried to grow, as long as it has sun.
Right.
I have full clay. I have really bad soil too, and I find like black-eyed Susan is really good. Butterfly milkweed, my butterfly milkweed have always done amazing, and they seem to be surviving just fine. Not only for flowers, but when it comes to like bushes that like native ones, I know Serviceberry does amazing on clay too. Elderberry is another good one.
Yeah.
They do have a variety of coneflowers, and they do pretty well as well.
Yeah.
So you just have to be careful with the watering. I do have mulch on top to help a little bit, and then I think over the years the soil has improved, so it's not as bad or as hard as it was when I moved here. But my plants were definitely established when it was just clay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, if I can add to what Beatrice said, definitely if you decide to go with a plant that it does say it requires loam or like a well drainage, make sure that you do a little bit of improvement to your soil. I know what is there and what is best suited is the best, just to mirror its native environmental conditions. But we do improve our soil. Make sure that when you plant, you just dig out much larger, sometimes up to 3 times the width of the container soil, especially at the top. And it may just get a little bit narrower to the bottom, because we do not want to have the teacup effect, like when we water. All that water just to get stuck at the bottom and to start rotting the root system. So don't leave too much space at the bottom, but dig out a very wide hole and add, I would say, not more than probably 40–50% like a good compost soil mixed with the natural soil. Again, like if you put only a new soil, again, it's not ideal, because we would like to keep these soil organisms that are already there, because they're very beneficial for the right root development of each plant. So I've definitely made as well, like Beatrice, lots of improvements, and I do grow, I live in South Oakville, I do grow a lot of these species that ideally do not like clay.
Yeah, there's a few questions as well on viability for seeds and how long they last. I think that would depend, like that's so dependent on not only the species, but the conditions in which they were stored, that it would be really hard for us to actually answer those questions. If they were storage with like proper humidity or like temperature, like all those things actually change viability. So it will depend, like there's so many variables around that. But I think the best way to try is to like try to germinate them, and if they grow, then they were still viable. If not, because it's really hard to tell just from looking at the seeds, unless they have a disease that is obvious, like mold or like insect bites or something like that, that will tell you that they're not viable. It's really hard to know if a seed is viable.
Yeah, I love placing mine in paper bags and leaving them in the garage or the cold storage. Yeah. Best way, I've seen people living in like glass jars or like different boxes. Paper bags are the best. I've had seeds that I've been using for over 5–6 years, even like including vegetables, and they're still great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to note that if you watch the introduction to seed saving with Dan Rubin from Seeds of Diversity, he does talk about germination and how to do germination tests.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There was another question about, like turtlehead. Turtlehead, it's how can you start turtlehead? And basically one of like the methods that Anelia mentioned are actually pretty good. So you just put it like outside. They love to be like in the, I think for them the best way is a natural cold, because they love the snow and the melt, like the snow when it melts. So I think just like putting them outside during the winter and then waiting for them to germinate in the spring. At least we do have a few on our pollinator gardens, and they have been propagating themselves that way pretty efficiently.
So what should you watch out for or keep in mind when growing your pollinator plants? Are there any other tips and tricks that you can offer us?
I would just say that planning is very important, because I mean, it's always trial and error with every type of gardening, I believe. But just proper planning. We do grow pollinator gardens not only with the sole purpose of beautifying, but just for creating a habitat and maintaining a balanced ecosystem and contributing to these urban pollinator patches and corridors that insects and pollinators need so badly. So a good planning, I tend to squeeze my plants. So I've been working and I've been learning every year just to allow them proper space. So that's the first thing that comes to my mind. Again, minimize resources and maintenance, just because that's huge, and that's another purpose of planting natives, just to less watering, less no pesticide use, just to match the plant with the right size, or to improve the soil to be suitable for that type of plant. So good planning, I guess, is big before you start the seeds and before you actually plant it out there and you're trying to figure out how to save it. I've had the aphids problem, but again, once you space out these milkweeds, you give them lots of space, you add a little bit of these helping companion plants, or the mildew issue with the wild bergamot, that's very easily treatable if you allow lots of space and proper moisture conditions for the plants.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. That's great. And it kind of leads into the next question. There are a fair number of teachers on this call. I know you guys do a lot of school programs, so both of you start chiming in. But what advice can you give to teachers? Tips for growing pollinator gardens at their schools? What plants should they put? What should they avoid? Easy maintenance plants. What are your suggestions?
Oh, that's a great topic.
Right?
And we're very passionate about this, because there's so much enthusiasm and so much willingness to create these pollinator habitats on school grounds, and at the same time, so many challenges to keep them alive. So the first thing that comes to mind to me is really make sure you coordinate your pollinator project with the school administration and the school board, just because we've seen lots of these pollinator gardens being mowed away in the summertime. And it's very sad to see a lot of these plants just not surviving because of somebody not being aware that they exist there. So making sure you have a good coordination, very drought resistant plants. We always say that, just because it's very hard to maintain a proper watering schedule with the school, especially during the summertime. With the newly established plants, they do need some watering, even native plants, until they're established. So drought resistant, again, matching the right plant to the right site. And just always think about a combination of plants. Just bushes are amazing. They're low maintenance. They're pollinator friendly for so many insects and birds. And we're always thinking of flowers, but there are a lot of other bushes that we could recommend, such as the serviceberry or the elderberry, or tons of others, depending on, again, and they could be more suitable even for shade and for clay soil. So consider planting bushes along with the wildflowers, and a diversity of pollinator species, so they have a chance to. And some of them may take over, others not, but that's the beauty of having the diversity. and increasing biodiversity, so we have a more resilient place.
Can I add as well that grasses are great for schools
Yeah.
too, and it's great for pollinators too. So there's a lot of studies lately that actually support the idea of having almost 50-50, so 50 grasses and then 50 flowers mixed in, and usually grasses tend to survive a little bit better in school grounds, just with bushes, as Anelia mentioned, than the delicate flowers. So that's another great way to like add biodiversity to the garden. As Anelia mentioned, it's important to be in the same page with the board. Each board has different species that they allow, and different procedures as well. I put our email on the chat, so if you want to chat a little bit more about pollinator programs and pollinator gardens for schools, we are happy to help. So it's like programs at Oakvillegreen. Another thing is that we are doing our spring sale.
I was going to ask about that.
And it's all natives. And it is one way to ensure that we are getting natives that are from the area, like the seeds are locally sourced. So we are bringing biodiversity, but at the same time keeping it local. And it should be running in like around mid-March, I think. So over there you can order not only specific plants, but you can order like bigger pollinator kits that are already ready to go.
So I'm imagining that we need to go to your website, and you'll have that set up there, and it'll be contactless pickup, following all the COVID protocols.
Exactly. So we are still trying to figure out, and that's why it's not running yet. Okay. How are we going to do it like COVID wise, and how are we going to, because we're going to have like probably drop of like times and where people can pick up their things instead of how we traditionally did it in the past.
It worked very well last year, and we did it in a very safe way. So I think it will be good.
What kind of selection was there?
Beatrice, do you have? Yeah.
Sure. So we have, as I said, like different types of grasses. So it includes like little blue stem, Indian grass. And again, it will depend on, I'm not participating in the species selection this year, but this is what we have had in previous years. Okay. We have different species of milkweeds. We have different trees and bushes like serviceberry, elderberry. We have oaks. We have different species of maples. We have native cedars. And when it comes to flowers, we have like black-eyed Susan. We have different like coneflowers.
Quite a diversity.
Yeah. So a good diversity. Yeah.
Awesome. We also will have both a small and a large pollinator kit. So it's just a good combination of plants that could be a good starter for your pollinator garden. So the small, last year we had just the large one, and we're going to include a smaller pollinator kit. So that would be amazing. I know that a lot of schools are interested about our pollinator kits because they just come handy rather than you selecting the plants. Just adding one more thing about schools, compaction. Soil compaction is huge. So when you choose your pollinator garden site, just make sure it's somewhere away from foot traffic, because this could be really detrimental to any type of plant that you decide to plant. So it's very important, somewhere more sheltered, more fenced out, or like beside the building. Yeah, so it'll be good.
I think we have time for like one or two questions. Are there any native plants recommended for shadier and more woodsy areas that might benefit pollinators?
Yes, the answer is yes. A lot of these plants are smaller, not as showy as you would expect with the ones that are sun-loving. But yes, there are a number of plants like the ginger, the Canada anemone, and a lot of these plants often are like this spice bush that I'm thinking about, that it kind of can grow. Tree species could be like the blue beech. So these are plants that we will be offering with the plant sale, and there will be a description of what conditions grow in.
Yeah.
But yes, there are a number of plants that you can grow in shady areas, but once again, they're more like a under story, like a cover, ground cover. Sometimes they may look, although some of them are beautiful, like the bloodroot. It is a shade loving.
Mm-hmm.
It's a gorgeous, beautiful, very early bloomer though. Also, some of these shady loving plants, they do not have the same long blooming period. So that's the one thing you should consider, but they still have a lot of benefits, and they have a great value in adding, in your backyard.
Wonderful. I have one more question.
I think if you stalk tall plants like
Yes.
milkweed, and if
Yeah.
so, how do you do that?
What is it, Beatrice?
Like if you stalk tall plants like milkweed, and if so, how? And the example that they give here is that they have Joe Pyeweed and it falls over when it rains.
Yes, I was just gonna say Joe Pyeweed is another. Yes, you may take it somehow. The best way is just if you plant it along a fence or along something just for support. It can still fall. I use these big staking circular things that they're sometimes used for tomatoes. They do grow, they do the job. I know it's very different when you see it in nature, like in natural areas, and they're all upright, they're tall, they're still looking good, and in our backyards they do fall. But again, like you can use a little bit of staking, be very gentle when you use that. But if you don't have the option to plant along a fence or along a wall, maybe just use some staking to support it.
Well, thank you both so very much for joining us for our Lunch and Learn today. We've had a great conversation, and I'm sure that there are many, many more questions. So Beatrice, if you could just provide your social media information and tell our participants how they can get a hold of you guys.
I just wanted to mention just a couple of more things. By working on these projects and a lot, like on our pollinator gardens and restoration projects, we've discovered that plants have this amazing, tremendous power of connecting, restoring the human connections to the natural world, and they provide such a better understanding for people about how ecological balance is dependent on all of us. So we're planning to continue to grow native plants, and knowing that we spread awareness and transform spaces, and we restore the human connections to this natural world, and just to not only to maintain the habitat, but really to inspire a sense of wonder, and just because also knowledge promotes conservation, stewardship, action. So I've put my last slide is with the names of the pollinator sites. If people are willing sometimes to go and have a look or volunteer with us, we are currently working on 3 pollinator projects: the Glen Abbey in front of the community center, Oak Park Pollinator Garden, beside Wellspring Center, and the Kingsford Pollinator Pathway, our newest project. Feel free to contact us and get involved. We would be happy to do so. And this is another beautiful little plant, Pearly Everlasting, on this image that I highly suggest, for it is a very drought resistant. And it is a lovely, beautiful plant to grow. Thank you so much. Thank you. It was a pleasure having the opportunity to facilitate this today.
Thank you very much. And thank you to everybody who was participating. Our next session is coming up at 2 o'clock. And for any of our teachers, we'll be talking about edible education with Sustain Ontario. So we'll be going live on Facebook as well as our event portal. But yes, thank you very much, Oakvillegreen, for joining us today. Bye, everyone.